What's up guys? Today we're going to be talking about a camera that I recently got gifted to me by my mom, the Olympus Stylus Zoom 105. So the Olympus Stylus Zoom is a 35mm point and shoot camera that was made in 1995 and has a 38 to 105mm f4.5 to f8.9 zoom lens. It definitely isn't the fastest point and shoot lens, but the images that come out of it are super sharp and super beautiful. The copy I have is black, but they also offered it in champagne gold and in silver. So I was recently given this camera from my mom when our family home sold almost a year ago, and I've been using it on and off ever since, and just trying to get a good grasp of if I like the camera and what I can use it for and stuff like that. This camera is actually the camera that took most of my childhood photos before there were like digital point and shoot cameras. There were a couple different versions of this exact camera over the years. Some of them have pop-up flashes, some can print the date on the frame itself, and there are a ton of different focal lengths and different zoom ranges depending on the model that you choose to get. Also, depending on the region your model is manufactured in, it will either say Olympus Stylus or Olympus Mu, and all Olympus Stylus cameras are Muse. So it can get pretty confusing when you're looking online for your own model, but just know that Stylus and Mu are the same thing. It was just a region-specific naming scheme that they used for different regions, different places that they released the camera. So the little U symbol is actually a Greek letter that means micro, and seeing as how small these cameras are when the lens retracts and how easy it is to put it in your pocket, I think the name is super fitting. If you see the word deluxe on your model, it just means that it most likely has the quartz date feature. Basically what that does is it superimposes the date onto each frame. Also, if you have a model that has VF printed on it, it means viewfinder, and what that means is that it has an extra bright viewfinder that blacks out every single time you take a photo, similar to how an SLR would take a photo and black out the viewfinder. This is like super useful in cases where the shutter has been fired, but it's a really loud situation or a really loud environment, and you don't know if the camera took a photo or not because you can't hear the shutter. So getting that little blackout every single time is really useful if you're taking pictures at like an amusement park or like a concert or anything like that. So these Olympus point and shoots were some of the most popular 35mm point and shoot cameras, and Olympus made millions and millions of copies. They are definitely not hard to find, and they are really incredibly popular and incredibly useful cameras. So like I said earlier, I've only had the Olympus Stylus for about 6 or 7 months, but I am quickly falling in love with this camera. Not only this camera, but just the point and shoot style of shooting film. I usually bring this camera to dinners with my family or intimate events where my primary focus isn't really to take photos. I also often bring this camera on walks with my sister and her little French bulldog when I'm just trying to enjoy the walk and enjoy the weather and enjoy the company, and my primary focus isn't really to take photos. It's just to go on a walk, get some exercise, you know, get some fresh air, and spend some time with my sister and her little French bulldog. If I see something like super interesting, I'll make a photo of it real quick, but I'm not running around the entire time trying to look for compositions and find photos and take a bunch of photos. So I think point and shoot cameras are perfect companions to bring along with you if you don't know whether you're gonna want to take photos, but you just want to have kind of a cheaper camera with you that you don't have to worry as much about, that has auto settings, and you know, just makes it really easy for you to take a picture of something if you see something interesting. The stylus that I got actually came with the strap attached and a leather case as well. I don't use the leather case, but I keep the strap on the camera all the time, and I just hang it around my neck. Because it's so light, I barely feel it when I'm walking around, and the fact that it's weatherproof and it's built like a tank makes me bring it in situations like I normally wouldn't bring a camera into. I also love the sound that it makes when, you know, you're opening it and the lens is opening, and also when the lens is retracting. It's just a really satisfying sound. So here's the sound of it. If you guys have heard this, it'll bring back some nostalgia. Oof, just like my whole childhood is that sound right there. Another thing that's kind of cool about this camera is that I grew up on the other side of this camera, and it's just a very nostalgic experience to be shooting with it, and also pretty liberating because, you know, when we were kids, none of us were allowed to like touch the cameras or use the cameras because they were so valuable and so delicate in the eyes of my parents, and they didn't want us to like drop it in the water or break it or anything like that. So it's cool to be able to use the camera that I couldn't ever touch when I was a kid, and it's definitely a liberating feeling that I'm really loving with this camera. So this camera has autofocus, but it definitely misses focus probably 2 to 3 times a roll, which is pretty normal for point and shoot cameras, but I know that there's some 35mm point and shoots that don't miss focus as much as this one, but I'm kind of okay with that. Like I said, it's a camera that I use for random photos when I'm out and about, and my primary focus isn't photography, so it's kind of like a sketchbook for me to, you know, take photos and make photos of different things, and then maybe come back to those locations later with my bigger cameras or my nicer cameras and, you know, make more intentional photos. But I love using it as a sketchbook as well. The lens is also super slow. So like I said, it's an f4.5 to f8.9. So when you're zoomed all the way out, you're only getting an f4.5 aperture, which is pretty slow. So if you're out and about in the sun and there's like a bunch of light, then, you know, obviously the camera will work super well. But anytime that you get into a more low light situation, the camera is definitely going to be more susceptible to camera shake, and that's a combination of the lens being so slow. Also, the minimum shutter speed on the camera is 1/15 of a second, which is definitely faster than some other point and shoots minimum, you know, shutter speed, but 1/15 is still really difficult to handhold and get a sharp photo with no shake, especially because the camera is also super light, so it makes that camera shake even worse when you're trying to, you know, make photos in low light situations. That being said, when there is a lot of light, the images that I get with this camera are super sharp and they're well exposed, and I honestly can't complain at all about the quality, considering this is just a full auto point and shoot camera and the fact that I got it for free as well. I also have to add that getting an incredible photo with a little point and shoot camera is one of the most satisfying feelings I have had since I started shooting film more regularly. There's just something so satisfying about using a little full auto point and shoot camera and getting the roll back, you know, a week later or a few days later after you're done shooting the roll, and finding those gems where everything came together perfectly, and it almost feels like you're manipulating luck or you're manufacturing your own luck. Film itself definitely has that feeling embedded into the process for sure, but it's even more satisfying when you get like a fire or like a banger photo with a little point and shoot camera. So I've definitely been loving that process as well. Something else I've noticed since I started shooting with this camera is just the process of using a point and shoot in general. The process is a lot faster. It's much more relaxed for me, and it makes it like way easier to blast through an entire roll. After a while, you stop thinking as much about each photo and you kind of just point it at something and shoot it. And that has definitely been a super liberating process, but it makes it a lot easier to blast through an entire roll. So when I'm loading film into this camera, when I'm trying to select a film stock to use with this camera, I've definitely shot Portra 400 in the camera, but I honestly prefer shooting kind of cheaper films like Kodak Gold or Kodak Color Plus, just because some part of me feels like I'm wasting the potential of Portra by putting it in a fully automatic point and shoot camera and not really, you know, utilizing the full latitude and the manual shooting process of using Portra and getting a really perfectly exposed shot on Portra. So I don't know if everybody feels this way about point and shoots, but right now I'm definitely limited in my financial capabilities, so I can't really buy a 5-pack of Portra 400 like every week or 2 weeks to put in this camera and just blast through the rolls. So I've honestly had an amazing time getting to know this little camera and have been super happy with the results that I've gotten so far. If you can't find one of these exact ones in your mom's old camera drawer like I did, these can be found on eBay for anywhere from like 40 to 50 bucks all the way up to like $100 plus. So I mean, it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it's definitely not as expensive as like a Minolta TC1 or a Contax T2. And like I said earlier, the process of using a point and shoot camera with automatic settings and is a vastly different experience of shooting than using a light meter and a fully manual camera. The photos that you create when you have less pressure have a completely different feeling, and I think there is a ton of value in that process. I tend to think of point and shoot cameras almost like a sketchbook or a very, very rough draft of, you know, the final result that I'm looking to get, but I've definitely gotten some photos from this point and shoot that I wouldn't really change at all, or I wouldn't try to go and recreate those photos. So I think there's a lot of value in all different processes of shooting film and shooting manually or shooting completely automatically. And I think that this is definitely a good camera to add to your, you know, collection of cameras. If all the cameras you have are completely manual, even if they have a built-in light meter, it just is a different process to be able to point this at anything, press one button, and you know you have a photo that's exposed well, that's in focus, that is, you know, going to look kind of the way that you wanted it to when you get the roll developed and everything like that. So if you made it this far in this video, thank you so much for watching and subscribing and supporting me on this channel and supporting my Instagram account. I truly love making these videos for y'all, and I'm super excited to get a little more consistent on this channel. So other than that, I hope you guys are having a good one, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.